actually incredibly nervous about this one because it's a bit of a personal story. That's me there at the first SydCSS first time speakers night. I look incredibly tiny there, but those guys are giants. So I'm actually normal size. Anyway, those insecurities aside, that's not what I'm here to talk about, but I'm going to talk about some other insecurities I have about breaking sort of a mould I was in and getting into a little bit more engagement with the web development community. And this SydCSS event was a bit of a pivotal moment for me because it was the result of a key personal decision and something that became somewhat of a catalyst for a lot of things that I've done since. As I said, since speaking at SydCSS, I've become more involved in the community in general. And Fiona and Dave asked me to come back here and share with you some of the challenges and benefits that I think come with doing that. But before I go into more detail, I want to say that I feel hugely underqualified to be offering any advice on how to be a good speaker, blogger, mentor, or event organiser. I'm simply not qualified to be giving that advice. And more important than that, I don't think I should be giving life advice to strangers or anyone for that matter. So I want to say in fact that this is simply my story about achieving some personal goals. And if you want to take anything from it, make sure that you apply your own experiences, your own aspirations, and your own context. I've got no doubt that you all do a better job than I do. So if you like, you can just think of this as a cautionary tale. So a bit of a fly over the top overview of some of what I've been involved in. It started with blogging, but after speaking at SydCSS, this soon progressed to attending other meetups and conferences. Before long, I was volunteering and occasionally speaking as well. And for a while, I thought I got this urge under control, but pretty soon I was back on the game. And this time I was not just using the community for my own gain, but I was helping to organise it as well. That's what web development with intent to supply means. It started when I helped to organise a hackathon at the University of Wollongong campus in Bega. I was living down there at the time. And not long after this, I helped to initiate and promote some monthly coding nights at a co-working space down there. And I suppose I can call it what I like, but we all know it was a meetup. Of course, not satisfied with the people that I might have misguided there. Earlier this year, I submitted a pitch to CSS Conf, and I was lucky enough to be offered a chance to present in Melbourne alongside some amazingly talented Australian and international speakers. And then after this, things kind of escalated quickly, and they might have even spiraled out of control now because I find that I'm a co-organiser of a brand new JavaScript meetup in Canberra, which is actually on tonight as well. So if anyone wants to come to Canberra, let me know. So it's been a pretty full-on year for me in terms of community engagement. As I go, I'm going to keep coming back to this slide with the various benefits and challenges, but for now we just have friends with benefits, because the first benefit that I found was meeting a lot of you guys, and a lot of you, whether you like it or not, I call some of you friends now. So. But of course, there's a lot of faces out there that I don't know, so I want you to come and say good day to me. Right, so looking back retrospectively at that little overview, it seems like I might have had some kind of plan, but maybe not as much as you think. Small decisions and conversations simply led me from one thing to the next. And the only decision that I really made was that I didn't want to be just a passenger and a passive participant in my career. I wanted to be a bigger part of what I spent so much time doing. I was attending conferences, I was reading all the right blogs, but I didn't participate and I wouldn't say anything. So basically I was a professional lurker. And I wondered if there's anyone else out there like that, and I want you to put your hands up if you might fit that. Any professional lurkers? A few. If you're a real professional lurker, you wouldn't put your hand up. So, without realising it, you've all made a decision that you don't want to be professional lurkers anymore. And I made that decision too. And to change that was freaking difficult. It was difficult because I built these people up in my mind to be untouchable web development gods. But what I've learned since is that we have such a close community, and many of the developers that I idolised are not untouchable. We can meet them, we can talk to them, in many cases we can even touch them. You should of course always ask before you touch anyone. These are mistakes that I've made so you don't have to. And on that topic, just remember that JavaScript developers can be a little bit skittish, so don't approach them from behind. What you can do, if you gain their trust, you can just gently put your hand on the back of their neck. And if you're lucky, they might console their feelings. There's a face. Right, so fear was the other thing stopping me, and that was a fear of my own ability, a fear of social rejection, and a fear of embarrassing myself. Still quite a valid concern, I think. But it was the fear of not trying and the fear of regret that encouraged me to reach out the most. But even this simple step's not easy for the uninitiated, and I want to share with you a few early awkward attempts. The first was an attempt to share something on Twitter. It was in reply to a comment by Mark Otto from GitHub, and he's also the man behind Bootstrap. And I made the comment that the GitHub Enterprise page looked very similar to the old Bootstrap 2 homepage. Of course, knowing full well that he developed Bootstrap, but obviously it didn't come across this way because Ben Schwartz, another GitHub employee, called me out, and he said something like, perhaps that's because he used to work at Twitter, you freaking idiot. And of course, the freaking idiot part was all in the subtext of my mind, but Ben's a lovely guy, he'd never say anything like that. And I've met him in person many times since. And unless he hears about this, he'll have no idea why I don't give him the eye. He scared me off Twitter for about a week, actually. And of course, it's a pretty insignificant thing, but at the time it felt like a big deal to me. And what I want to say is that feeling awkward is pretty normal and okay when you're doing something for the first time. Either that or I might be an idiot. The next was my first encounter with David Lewis. It was at Web Directions Respond a little over a year ago. Actually, maybe 2 years ago now. And I wandered away from the main crowd looking for a dark corner somewhere a little more suitable for a lurker. And of course I found Mr. David Lewis there. He was pacing back and forth, rehearsing his notes, and I could see he was incredibly nervous. And I gave him a shy, awkward smile and said, "How you get on?" It was a classic man crush, basically. And I was surprised that he was happy to talk to me. He told me a little bit about how he got into speaking and how he got into organising SydCSS, and I was really grateful for that. And he followed up a little bit later with a blog post. And I recommend you should all read that. Hang on a second. It was a few weeks later that I reached out to David and said that I'd like to try speaking at SydCSS. And of course he didn't know me or what kind of experience I had. So he did the smart thing and he said, "I'll get back to you." But to his credit, he did. And he said that they decided to organise the first time speakers night. And maybe that was just a waiver for them in case I tanked. But I think it turned out to be, it was? Yeah. I think it turned out to be a whole lot more because I know Fiona has said to me many times since that the first time speakers nights are some of the most rewarding and engaging experiences for everyone involved. And that's why I'm happy to stand here and try and take a little credit for it. So I made a commitment and I was giving a talk, but I didn't really have much of a plan beyond this. I realised that if I was going to change, I needed to commit myself to something. And once you commit, if you've got a healthy amount of fear, you'll usually find a way to not embarrass yourself too much, and I was banking on that. But now I felt the pressure to work like it. I prepared my talk more than a month in advance, and I practiced it every day. I recorded myself and I listened to it on the drive to work. And I didn't just work on my talk because I thought, oh crap, my name's on the website. What if someone sees my website? Well, no, I'm a fraud for sure. And that's of course irrational. I know no one gives a shit about my website, and I've got stats that prove that. But nonetheless, it forced me to give it a small amount of attention and to start blogging some more too, because I wanted fresh content. So I'll go back to this one here, and I'll just add that it's a great way to get motivated, but it is stressful and it is hard work. So I came to Sydney nervous as hell and probably keen to make some connections and keen to impress as well. I'm sure my body language was screaming, please like me, but you're all really kind, so thank you for that. I felt super pumped after my talk, and I've learned since that speaking is a really great way, it's a really great icebreaker and a great way to meet people. So I want to just add those two there. And the great advantage of meeting people is learning new stuff, of course. So we'll add that as well. After my talk, I tried to stay in touch with a few of the people that I connected with, and I'd like to challenge people here tonight to do that as well. Share an idea, share a question, share a comment, something, maybe something you're working on. If you like, you can share it with me. This is a great way to make a more meaningful connection with someone, but as well as that, you've got to add collaboration there and lazy word as well. But you've got to take a non-responsive stride too, because people aren't always going to have an interest in what you're doing or time to reply. Perhaps a better way to collaborate is to actually offer help on something that they're working on. You almost guarantee a response, and I think Michael's a pinnacle example of that. He might tell you more about that. So we'll add objection there as well. Now, even though it might not be a significant thing to anyone else here, for me it was a challenge and I felt like I'd achieved something. At this point, it would have been really easy for me to go back to saying, to being quiet and doing nothing. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep challenging myself, and I was hoping that sooner or later it would be all stress and hard work. I'm still hoping that turns out to be true. But nonetheless, it was a sense of achievement, so I'm going to add that up there as well. My next challenge was writing a pitch for CSS Conf, and I didn't feel like I was ready. The only reason I did this was that some people I met at SydCSS actually encouraged me to do that, so I'm going to add encouragement. My talk was called a CSS eulogy, and I had this idea because I sometimes get sad saying goodbye to CSS techniques that are outdated, but I love to use them. That's of course a normal thing for a well-adjusted person to be sad about. I can't really tell you why it was a successful pitch. Michael's actually on the organising committee for CSS Conf. Maybe he can tell you, but I would be more than happy to share my pitch with anyone who is interested, so drop me a line if you'd like to see that. Sometime between SydCSS and CSS Conf, I started getting more feedback on my blog. I was totally chuffed one time when Libra shared an article on some contrast mixins that I wrote, and more recently, my inner 6-year-old absolutely shat himself when Chris Square shared a technique I developed about responsive typography. I was really excited about that actually, and I told my dad, and he was like, "That's awesome, but who are these people?" And fair enough. Your friends and family can be really good for helping you get things in perspective, but I do think that a little bit of social validation is something you can be proud of, so name or not, I'm going to put it up there. There's two other types of feedback I get. The first one is, "Oh, I found this typo on your blog." And that's awesome because I can fix it, and they usually mean well, and it's not harshly worded criticism. But it can be a little bit deflating when you've gone over something with a fine-tooth comb and you realise that you still suck. Worse is when people point out obscure errors in your code and personal projects, and I had a really good one time. Someone was telling me that the build process for my personal website didn't work on their particular operating system and setup. And that's really great, but I only need to build my website on my machine, so whatever. I'll get right on it. The other thing is, maybe some people will decide that they just don't like you. And I'm not going to give you examples of that, but you'll find this in the comments section of any blog ever, as well as on GitHub issues and Reddit. So you're going to have a small amount of resilience too. And one more thing, and this is something that's only happened a little bit to me more recently, and that is with a little bit more exposure come more opportunities. These might be opportunities in the workplace, there might be opportunities to do something, to share something, or to help someone. One of the most rewarding things for me is when someone I don't know reaches out to me and says, "Thanks for something I wrote," or "Hey, I use this technique, have this idea," or sharing something, anything with me, asking me for help. That's really rewarding, and I hope I continue to see it that way. If more people start doing that, we'll see how that goes. But the opportunity to help someone is really rewarding. Or it might be that you get the opportunity to come back here to the place where it all started, and with the community that helped you when you encouraged you to do all these things, and those people that make it such a special thing to be involved in. So, of course, I'm going to list that opportunities and say a huge thank you to everyone here. Thank you.